right, we're back. Welcome to 2026, and welcome to the unofficial Maple Leafs post-game breakdown. I hope everybody had a good New Year's Eve. I know I definitely did. Probably went a little harder than I should have because I was still very hungover last night. That's why I didn't upload a video on the Leaf game then, but it's like midday today, so I figured I'd do one on the Leafs comeback from last night. And also, I want to do a little bit of an outlook, projection for the Leafs. Toronto's big three: Leafs, Raptors, and Jays. Just give a little projection of where I think those teams are going to end up, and just Toronto sports in general of how it's going to look in the year 2026. So let's get into it. So obviously, first thing that I want to talk about is the Leafs comeback last night. Bit of a rough start. I think Winnipeg kind of surprised them. They've had their own struggles for a little bit now. They kind of came out pretty hot. Wall didn't have the best game. He wasn't tracking pucks as well. I also, with that being said, the defensive coverage in the zone wasn't good either. They were leaving some pucks in the slot. They were kind of slow. So, I think it combined to just kind of have an overall bad start to the game. So I can't blame Wall on that too much, but then kind of gets a bit of a mercy pull, I would say, because you don't want to shatter his confidence. So they take Wall out, bring in Hildeby, and he just shuts it down. Absolutely shuts it down. I think it gave the Leafs a little bit of motivation there for one, I think they still believe that they were in that game. There was enough time left, but they also wanted to win it for Wall. At least get it close enough so your goaltender doesn't feel bad about you guys losing the game, right? So they end up pulling through. Matthews gets on fire, and they pull through in a 6-5 victory in regulation. So don't even take it to overtime, which I'm pretty impressed at. The Leafs actually get it done in regulation, so that's huge. Matthews gets a hat trick, which is basically the story of the night. He's now one behind Matt Sundin for the all-time goals record for the Leafs. Matthews at 419, Matt Sundin at 420. And the reason to me why that's incredible, as somebody who watched Matt Sundin, my whole childhood growing up, idolizing the guy, Matt Sundin played a lot of years here. And for Matthews to only be 28 years old and to already be one goal behind, Sundin, he's going to tie that record pretty soon, probably in the next game. It's incredible that he's done it at such a fast pace. He's not even 30 yet. He still has hopefully another 10, 12 years of playing time left in Toronto. So I think that most points records or goals records or any records in general are going to be held by Austin Matthews by the time his tenure in Toronto is done. I don't know if he's going to spend all of those years playing in Toronto specifically, but while he's still here for at least the next 4 or 5, hopefully, he's going to set every record there is for the most part. But yeah, honestly, it just looks like he's mainly back to his old self. He seems like he's a step ahead of the play now instead of a step behind, which is how he's been for the majority of 2.5 seasons now. He seems like the injury period for him has been over. He seems to be healed up pretty good from what it looks like anyways. And it looks like he's just kind of back to his old self. So if he's back on the pace that he was used to being at, I think this team has a hell of a shot at actually getting in the playoffs, even though they need quite a record to do that. But I still think they can do it. It seems like they've kind of bought into the systems now. They seem more confident in themselves. They seem to have found an identity, I guess. It's only time will tell for the most part. But even with Berube, it seems like there's less friction of it now. I just think that judging how the last couple of weeks have gone for this team, it seems to be a pretty big swing, especially the power play too. Power plays are like 60% now compared to the 13% it was before. So, getting rid of Mark Savard and bringing in Sullivan, it just seemed to be a very small tweak that at the time I didn't like. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't like it. I didn't mind it. I just said it was kind of a lateral move. It wouldn't really make too much of a difference, but I was wrong. It made a hell of a difference. This power play's one of the deadliest in the league now, which is pretty incredible. So, good on them. I guess I was wrong for that one. I'm okay with admitting that. But yeah, it just seems like this has been a kind of a turning point now. So, as I said before, I don't think this is going to be like a St. Louis 2019 turnaround, but I think that at least this season can be competitive. I think most people, including me, for the majority of the beginning of the season, I kind of thought it was a throwaway year. And it seems like, they're going to be in contention at least, which that specifically is favorable for one reason alone is because the standings are so different this year. It's so close between first and last. Buffalo is winning games, so I don't know what kind of world we're in now. Buffalo seems to be kind of a wagon. You got Detroit leading. Florida's had their struggles. Boston hasn't been that good. So it just seems like there's a real chance for them to actually, if they get into the playoffs here, to face an opponent that they haven't before, and maybe they can get over some of those demons and whatnot. But at least it's going to be a competitive season, if nothing else. So I don't think it's a throwaway, thankfully. So yeah, other than that, let's go to the Raptors real quick. So Raptors are 5-5 in their last 10, and I don't really get too much time to actually watch the team. But they're a pretty strong team right now. I do think they can make a decent playoff run. There was a couple years there after their 2019 championship where they just kind of were in the midst of things. It was obviously a tear down. Kawhi leaves, most of the guys in the championship team leave kind of one after another after there. So they went through kind of a rebuilding stage, but now it seems like they have a pretty good core. They got Quickly, Barnes, RJ Barrett, they got Ingram. So it seems like they got a pretty good core four. I hate to say that, but a core four that they can really build around. Even Grady Dick too. He's made some huge strides this year in improving his game. So with this team, obviously you got OKC in the league, who's just a wagon. They seem to almost never lose. So I don't think you're ever going to be at the level right now, or especially at the end of this season, where you're going to compete with an OKC or some of the other teams in the league that are just really, really good. But I think that you're at least going to get in the playoffs. They're fourth in the Eastern Conference right now. So there's definitely, similar to the Leafs, I'd say. I think they're in a bit of a better position personally. But it's going to be a competitive year. It's going to be nice when springtime rolls around and you have these two teams hopefully in competitive playoff spots and at least making, interesting runs in their respective sports. So I think it's going to be a pretty positive springtime for Toronto sports. Now, with that being said, obviously the springtime, baseball comes around. And, after that horrific loss in the World Series, I think the main question that most Toronto or Jays fans, anyways, have with this team is, can they actually return to the World Series? The main reason that they got there in the first place last year was because every guy that they had, for the most part, it was very, not well-known players on small deals had career years, and including their star players too. They had career years. Everybody had some of the best seasons that we've ever seen. So with that being said, is the likelihood of that happening again? Like I don't think so. I think you're obviously, some guys are gonna have good seasons, some guys are not. But in order for them to do what they did last year, it's gonna take an incredible amount of luck. Sometimes even if you play well, the ball's not going to bounce your way. You're not going to get the timely hits that you need. So, do I think they're going to go back to the World Series? No. No, I don't. I think they're going to be a really tough team to play against. Be in playoff contention, win a couple of rounds, but for them to actually get back there would take an incredible amount of luck. I really hope they do. Honestly, it would be great to see them go back to back, just, getting to the World Series, but I don't know. And the other point that I want to make in the Jays too is, I was reading on Sportsnet this morning. The Jays are in mix for Tucker, Bichette, Bellinger, and Bregman. And that's great to hear. I love it when the Jays are in on guys making moves. Personally, from a Jays fan perspective, I wish they would just spend all the money in the world and just buy everybody so we could crush the friggin' Dodgers or whoever else is in the finals next year. Just run over everybody, spend as much money as we possibly can, and just, kind of be like the Dodgers, just overspend, whatever. But obviously they're not going to do that to that extent. But, if they're in on these four guys, I would like to at least see them retain Bichette or like re-sign him, and at least get one of the other three. Maybe Tucker, Bellinger, Bregman. I prefer probably Tucker for the most. Tucker and Bichette would be an incredible team to have. I think it's really deflating for Jays fans when you read about them, being in on these guys, and then they end up getting none of them. And then you're like, well, you have all this hope and positivity built up towards them making a big trade or a big signing, and then it doesn't happen, and you just feel like the team's going to go nowhere. So I really hope with them putting that out, they are actually in the mix for those four guys. Hopefully, they at least get 2 out of 4. That would make a big difference for this team. And if they do sign one of those 4 or 2, I think the odds of them getting back to the World Series are much different. I think it increases them dramatically, and I would start to believe at that point. Now, a lot of things can go wrong between April and October, but still, I would feel much more confident if that happened. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I think it's going to be. I think 2026 is going to be a good time to be a Toronto sports fan. I think a lot of positivity in the cities. In the city, all these teams seem to be trending in the right direction in terms of where they are in their development. They seem to be trending upwards. Obviously, it would be nice to see the Leafs actually do something, win a championship before I die. But is it going to happen this year? Maybe not. Raptors, I think, will be pretty good this year. And Jays, as I said, I think it's possible they make it back to the World Series, but not likely. So that's pretty much the summary of it. Appreciated doing this. If you're tuning in, really appreciate it. And Leafs play tomorrow, Hockey Night in Canada. I don't exactly know who they play, but I will be there for the unofficial post-game breakdown after that game. So I'll see you then, and have a good one.